Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on sight reading and how to create expert sight readers. That is what I'm hoping to help you with this morning so that your students can become expert sight readers. So we're going to talk about what sight reading actually is, and I'm going to show you resources that I find really helpful for my own students. Now, when you signed up for this webinar, you answered some questions, and we're going to see the answers to those questions very soon because, of course, we have the fantastic Beth who is helping me out today. So Beth is going to monitor questions in the chat. So I can see one there already. Will this be available as a replay? Yes, it absolutely will. Mallory, no problem there. Beth is going to show us the stats, and also Beth is going to be my trusty volunteer for some of the activities that I'm going to demonstrate today. So thank you all for putting aside your very precious and valuable time on Friday morning Sydney time, or whatever time it happens to be for you. I know life is really busy, and I just appreciate it so much that you're prepared to take the time for this professional development. It really means a lot to me. So thank you. And I think that you're going to find this really helpful. Now, the webinar will go for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I just need to let you know that we're contending with a little bit of noise. You're about to hear an aeroplane go over, the joys of living under a flight path, and there's a bunch of rainbow lorikeets in the trees across the road that are just making a huge racket. So there's lots of noisy things that fly this morning that threaten to interrupt our webinar, but we will keep going no matter what. Okay, now I wonder, do we have any expert sight readers among us this morning? And what I would like you to do is you can press the button to raise your hand, or you can actually raise your hand. I'm having a look at everybody right now. You don't need to be modest. And I promise you, I will not ask you to actually sight read in front of everybody, but just raise your hand if you consider yourself to be an expert sight reader, and maybe put it on gallery view so that you can all see who's got their hand up. So if you consider yourself an expert sight reader, pop your hand in the air. Okay, great. So a couple of hands. Now, what I'd like you to do is keep your hand up if you do a lot of sight reading. There we go. No hands go down. And I have asked this question in every sight reading workshop I've ever done over the past 20 years, and it's always the same. The people who put up their hands, who are the expert sight readers, are also the people who do a lot of sight reading. I have never ever met an expert sight reader who did not do a lot of sight reading. It's just like when we learn our native language. We can learn to read and become fluent. We can learn to do it when it's not an innate talent. So I wanted to tell you another story about something else that I used to do at the beginning of my sight reading workshops. I used to say to everybody, this was back in the day when where we were all in the same room. Remember that time long ago when we used to have live workshops? So I used to say there'd be all these piano teachers in the room to come and hear about sight reading. And I would say, okay, now everyone, before you got here, I put a yellow dot, just like this one. I stuck a yellow dot underneath one chair. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to look under your chair and see if you have got the yellow dot. And if you do, then you are the lucky person who gets to come out the front and sight read this 7th grade example for everybody. Well, the atmosphere in the room would go ice cold. Everyone would sit like this. Oh my goodness, I hope. And you could tell no one wanted it to be them. And then I would confess, look, actually, no, I didn't put a yellow dot under anyone's chair. I just said that to sort of prove a point. This is how we all feel about sight reading. And if we teachers feel this way about sight reading, imagine how our students feel. There's no way that they're comfortable. So the idea of today's session is to show you ways that I use to make students feel more comfortable about sight reading on the way to becoming an expert. And we're going to come back to this book. This is the official sort of book of sight reading examples that students would find in an exam in Australia. This is the Australian Music Examinations Board book of sight reading. So we're coming back to that later. But in today's session, we're just going to talk about how to get more confident. And now I would like to talk about what is sight reading. So we've had someone says they're in the minority because they love sight reading. Yeah, now, Marianne, that's a really good point. We're going to come back to that because invariably there would usually be somebody in the workshop who wanted to come and who wanted the yellow dot. I'm going to come back to that. So here's what I consider to be the definition of sight reading. I think it is the reading and performing of a piece of music from notation that the performer has not seen before. And I think it's really important to have the word performing in there because it really is supposed to be a fluent performance with no fixing. When we're sight reading something, we cannot stop and practice it. We cannot try to fix things. We have to keep going no matter what. That's why we're always saying to our students, keep going, keep going, keep going. It is really just like performing. So when you signed up, we talked all about sight reading and we asked you to answer a few questions. So now I'm going to ask Beth to show the answers that everybody came up with, the statistics of everyone who signed up. Over to you, Beth.
Awesome. Thank you, Samantha. So our very first, oh my goodness, that was our second question. Our first question on the questionnaire was, what percentage of your students are proficient sight readers? And you can see the strongest majority was in the 21 to 40% range, followed by a close second and third in 0 to 20 and 41 to 60.
Yeah, so they're pretty even. That's an even split, those blues.
Yes, absolutely. And a very teeny tiny sliver, so small that we couldn't even print it, was 81 to 100%.
Oh, wow. Isn't that amazing? So yes, teeny tiny. I'm impressed that there even are teachers who have 81 to 100% of their students who are proficient sight readers. So it looks as though from the absolute majority is somewhere 0 to 60% are proficient sight readers.
Agreed. Our second question was rating your own sight reading skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being extremely poor to extremely proficient. And I am delighted to report that the majority of our respondents were higher than average in their own confidence in sight reading.
That's great. Isn't that good to know? The majority is an 8. But, you know, we probably, even though we might rate ourselves as really proficient, that sometimes doesn't mean that we want to sight read in front of other people, does it? So sometimes the confidence is a separate issue, but it's really good to know that most of us teachers who are in the session today are an 8.
Excellent. Our next two questions have to do with using different sight reading resources. The first question was, have you used the Blitz sight reading series? And more answered no than yes. So 56% have not yet used those resources.
Okay, well, that's good to know because I'm going to be showcasing that today.
And then our last question was, do you currently use rote repertoire as a sight reading tool with your students? And we had 69% respond with a no as well.
Okay, also good to know because I plan to show how that was originally conceived purely as a sight reading tool, actually. So it's great for teaching by rote and it's great for using as repertoire, but it's really, really good for sight reading. Okay, thanks so much for all that, Beth. Now, getting back to that yellow dot story and to what Marianne said before, occasionally there would be one really confident teacher in the room who would go, "Oh, I wanted the yellow dot. I wish we were doing that." So usually I would get them out the front and I would interview them. And I would say, "Okay, how is it that you are a good sight reader? Why? Why are you a good sight reader?" And here are the answers that I would get. They would say things like, "Oh, I just play all the time." They would say things like, "Oh, I just had to." You know, you're often just put on the spot and had to sight read from a young age. Played for church is a very, very common response. And this means you're kind of always playing in ensembles and accompanying people, and forces you to keep going. Some people just said, oh, I really worked at it. But not one single person has ever said, I was born that way. That is not what happens. That is not how we become good at sight reading. We do not exit the womb being amazingly able to sight read music. So sight reading is not a gift. It is not an innate inborn talent. It's something we develop, and it's a very purposeful skill that it's completely separate from the performing of piano recital pieces. That is a rehearsal and mastery skill. Sight reading is a separate skill that has to be practiced separately, and we're going to talk all about that. And also, speaking of gifts, there are live bonuses for you for being here today, and that's going to come later on towards the end. So stay tuned. There are gifts for you, and in fact, there are 3 of them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how we're going to go about creating expert sight readers. Imagine that this signpost represents the elements that we need to break down in order to become good at reading what's on the page. The first thing we need to do is rhythm, be able to read rhythm separately. Next, we need pitch. Next, we need to be able to recognize patterns. And as pianists, we absolutely have to be able to recognize chords. That is essential, because if we can't read chords, we really cannot sight read very quickly, and that is unique to keyboard instruments. So the next signpost enables us to, let's talk about the artistry and the more advanced capabilities we need when we're sight reading. So the first one is scanning. We have to scan through that music and be able to notice differences. Then to analyze it is it's so important, because if something's in ternary form and we're sight reading it, we straight away know that when we get back to section A, that a lot of that material is going to be repeated. Artistry. We don't just want to read rhythm and pitch and patterns and chords. We have to be able to read staccato and legato and all sorts of phrasing and other expression markings, dynamics, repeat signs, all sorts of things. And finally, we must have fluency above all, which kind of relates back to rhythm. So once we have all of those things, then we have expert sight readers. And how do we get there? We get there with good resources. So I have written 2 different sight reading series, or resources, if you like. The first one, this is a series that is notation based, purely notation based. It's understanding everything that's on the page. It starts off with a beginner book for students in their first couple of terms of learning, and goes right through to roughly a grade 5 level, which is late intermediate, early advanced. And then the other sight reading resource I've written is the rote repertoire series, which 70% of teachers had not ever used from a sight reading point of view. So I'm going to showcase parts of these resources for you today to show you how I use them, as well as some other things that I do. Also, if you are outside Australia, this is what the sight reading books will look like for you, because these are the UK editions that are suitable for the ABRSM syllabus. But they're pretty much, the material's pretty much exactly the same. Okay, so Bossa Breathe. This is the music that I held up before. This is the 7th grade example. If you happen to be at a keyboard and you want to try this out, please do. But this is, I would consider this to be very difficult. Would you agree that this is difficult? How many of your 7th grade students, now 7th grade is equivalent to early advanced to advanced. Students will have been learning for at least 6 or 7 years usually before they've got to 7th grade. How many of your students would successfully sight read this in an exam? Because I would say most of mine would struggle. I think this is really hard. But as teachers, this is the one that I was going to put people on the spot for, that I pretended for the yellow dot story. So I would like someone who would have been disappointed that there was no yellow dot. I would like someone to volunteer now to come off mute and just tell me what you see when you are looking at this example, because you're probably breaking it down without even realizing that you're breaking it down. Do I have a volunteer? Someone who would like to just tell me what they're seeing? Is there anybody?
The 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 quaver rhythms.
Yes. Now, hang on. Who is it that's speaking?
Sandy.
Sandy. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay. All right. So yes, the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. So you've ingested the rhythm straight away, but that is so important. And Sandy, what else do you notice?
That was really just the main thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I've got for you.
No problem. Well, the rhythm is the most important thing. When I'm looking at that, I'm seeing repetition. Oh, yes?
Sam, it's just Robin. I was going to say,
Robin?
when I look at that, I actually don't necessarily look at the 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, which is pretty obvious. I tend to look at the left hand and see it's the 4 quavers and where the right hand slots in with the left hand.
Yes.
So I don't have to be counting it necessarily, just keeping the left hand even and the right hand coming in with the accent on that last one of the 4. So I look at the pattern, that blocked pattern.
Great. That's right. So you see, when you are, Sandy and Robin, who are both experienced sight readers, are not looking at it. Our students who can't really sight read properly might look at that. They'll just have a panic attack. They'll just see accents and accidentals and lots of notes and think, wah! But when we look at it, we're seeing, there's patterns. There's patterns in the left hand. There's repetition in the left hand. There's a repetition of the shape of the chord. There are accents which help us keep the rhythm going. So we're able to break it down. And the idea of the session today is to show you how I help my students break down these elements from a very, very early age so that they too are not scared when they eventually get to something like this. So these are the 5 elements we're going to talk about today: rhythm, pitch, patterns, chords, and pieces. And we're going to start off with rhythm because rhythm is the absolute most important thing. Now, I'm going to do a little activity now to just explain to you, just to demonstrate the importance of rhythm and why I like to prioritize rhythm over pitch. Rhythm to me is the absolute essence of music. You can actually strip out the rhythm of a piece and it becomes unrecognizable. So for example, I'm going to start playing a piece. I would like you to raise your hand. No spoilers, don't say what it is. Just raise your hand as soon as you recognize this piece of music. Okay, pretty much no hands, maybe one hand. Okay, now I'm going to clap it instead. No pitch. Here we go. What's this piece? Raise your hand if you recognize it. Okay, many more hands. Okay, so of course it was. But when I took the rhythm out, if we had pitch only and no rhythm, you can't recognize it. When we have rhythm only and no pitch, it was much easier to recognize. Okay, let's do it with another one. Here is pitch again. Pitch, no rhythm. What's this? Sounds pretty random, doesn't it? It sounds like some random sonatina. Now I'm going to put the rhythm back in. I'm going to have pitch as well, but I'm going to play some of the pitches incorrectly. Okay, so it was the first Noel. If you play it like this, that doesn't sound like it. If you put the rhythm in, even if some of the notes are wrong, we can still recognize it. And I tell my students when you're watching someone perform, if they're playing confidently and they're keeping on going and the piece sounds a bit weird, we just go, oh well, that's probably how the piece sounds. We just can watch that performance. So the performer could be playing wrong notes, but if the piece is fluent and they keep going, it's fine. If the performer is stopping, even if all the notes are correct, if they're stopping and then starting and stopping and starting, as an audience, we can't enjoy that. We are not getting a sense of the piece. So when we're playing, when we're sight reading, rhythm is absolutely the number one thing that has to be correct. So here I use a lot of rhythm flashcards and, you know, introduce rhythms with flashcards. That's really important. But here's how it's approached in the sight reading series. So we start off with the beginner book, and it's pretty simple. We just have crotchets and semi-breves, or quarter notes and whole notes. So these are very simple. Very simple. There'll be a whole page of these. That's only showing part of the page. That's at the beginning of the beginner book. By the end of this beginner book, so I guess maybe students might have been learning for 18 months to 2 years. By the time they get to the end, we're very proficient at reading whole bar rests. We're reading minims, dotted minims, quavers in all sorts of groupings. So let's all clap the middle rhythm now. And imagine that you've had a student who has been doing this for about 18 months. So here we go. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, so a lot of rests in there to clap. I think it's really important to be experienced in reading rests, because in my experience, most students ignore rests when they're sight reading. They just want to play the notes and they don't pay any attention to rests, and silence in music is very important. So then we would go on to, once we finish the beginner book, we'd go on to book 1. The beginner book was written kind of after book 1. Book 1 is for students who are starting out, let's say, on an exam journey, round about preliminary grade, which means they've been learning for usually a minimum of 2 years. So preliminary grade is book 1, and it goes through to about grade 3 standard of sight reading. These books were written by myself and Michelle Matter, who is my colleague at AMS, who was my colleague at AMS. And we wrote the series after extensively piloting a system that we call the Sight Reading Society, and that was about 20 years ago. So by the end of book 1, we are successfully sight reading in 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, common time, but most importantly 6/8. So let's all clap the middle rhythm here, which is in 6/8, and I like to teach my students to count in like this: 1, 2, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here we go. So that's really different from the other rhythms on the page. And as you can see, we're getting good at sight reading dotted notes and ties, and the dotted notes have completely different function in 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4 than they do in 6/8. And we have to be able to look at a rhythm and know how they sound. If students are getting stuck with how to clap these rhythms on the page, they can go and look them up on the Blitzbooks website. They can download the audio files to help them. So practicing rhythms are really good. In book 2, we do 2 hand rhythms. So let's do this. This is right hand on the right knee, left hand on the left knee. I'm going to do it up here on the fall board. Okay, here we go. 1, 2. Left, together. So these are really fun exercises, and it's also excellent. You can do it on 2 different chimes. You can do it on 2 different boom whackers. You could even do it on 2 different notes on the keyboard if you want to, but we're reading just rhythm, no pitch. By the end of book 3, which is getting up to a 5th grade standard of sight reading, now we're sight reading in irregular time signatures, which is really fun. So all of my students who have come through this series have no problem doing this. If you have a 5th grade student who's never done any sight reading, they would probably look at that and maybe have a slight panic attack, but it's really easy for them if they're used to doing it. So why don't we all tap out this one now? I'm going to play it on the piano. I'm going to do a low C for left hand. I'm going to do a high E for right hand. And this is also quite fun for students to do. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. can do that, can get really confident at doing that. And even though that may seem like a complicated rhythm to have to tap out, that is actually the rhythm from an intermediate piece in 7/8. We have these rhythms in real life in pieces that we play. So if we can't read the rhythm by itself, we haven't got a hope of being able to read it once pitch is introduced as well. And that's why rhythm exercises are so, so, so important. So now we're going to move on to pitch, and the way it's introduced in the book is kind of trying to create a flashcard experience. We're using landmark notes. So we're starting off just with C, D, and E, and then we're just going to randomly play those. And then we gradually move on to more and more landmark notes. By the time we get to the end of the beginner book, we're able to randomly play notes that are from low C to high C. So there's a section of the book that is literally called random note reading, and we're supposed to just be able to jump around the keyboard and play. Then by the end of book 1, we've expanded that range a little more. We're down just below the stave and just above the stave. By the end of book 2, we're able to randomly jump around and sight read notes with accidentals and also with fingering. It's really important to be able to sight read fingering because that helps with the fluency of a piece. And by the end of book 3, we're actually doing it, jumping around and sight reading random notes in intervals as well. So if you've got a keyboard in front of you, why don't you try this one now? And if you don't have a keyboard in front of you, what I'd like you to do is play it on an imaginary keyboard in front of you. So I want to watch what your hand. Here we So it's very Schoenbergy. It's not meant to sound like a piece. This is literally meant to be a fun part of the book called Random Note Reading. So I was watching you and I could see that even if you had no piano there, you were going to the right spot. Your hands would, you knew which part of the keyboard you were supposed to go to. You know the geography of the keyboard. And I think that's what we're trying to teach students with this section, to be able to see a symbol and instantly know where we are going to on the keyboard. It's really, really important. So another way you can do this is with flashcards, and I'd like to show you now how I like to use flashcards. So this, for example, is a huge set that I've got. This is just, I don't know, this is a Bastion set of flashcards or something like that, but I've split it up into little sets. And this first set here contains only the C's. And what I like to do is just use the C's as landmark notes. And we might start off with, just 3 of them. We might do these 2 and middle C. And I will be holding these up for students and asking them to just play the C that I hold up. And eventually we get on to doing the really high C and the really low C. I also point out to them, where are we, that these are mirror image of each other. All the C's are mirror image of each other. So we have 2 ledger lines above the stave and 2 ledger lines below. That's mirror image. They are those really high ones. And then 3 spaces up, 3 spaces down, and then the 2 in the middle. So there are 6 C flashcards here, but there are only 5 sounds that they're going to play. And we might spend 3 weeks just doing the C's, and they become really, really, really good at it. And then I move on to the next set. So I've separated these all out. These are all the D's and B's that I've got here. And so then I say to my students, okay, I'm going to show you these flashcards. These are all, I might say that they're D's and B's. I don't get too hung up on the names, but I just say all of these flashcards are either 1 note higher or 1 note lower than the C that you played. So when I show them this, they are orientated towards, they know it's near this C, and they can just see it's 1 note lower. And then when I show them this, oh, it's just 1 note lower than middle C. When I show them this, they're not scared of that. Normally, students would be very scared of playing that flashcard, but they can just see it's 1 note lower than the C. So then we get really good at all the D's and B's. I'm not asking them to name it. I'm asking them to play it. I used to ask my students to name flashcards, but actually it doesn't help their sight reading. What helps is to be able to instantly play it, to see a card and play it. And then we go, when they're really good at that, I incorporate the C's back in, and then we go to the next step, which is all the A's and E's. Now, all of these are 2 notes higher or 2 notes lower than the C. And then finally the F's and G's. And then we've got, they can play this entire set of flashcards that goes from here to here. And they're not scared. They can go all over the keyboard. And that is really, really important. Now, the 6 C's is a game that I also like to play going from an oral perspective. So, for example, let's imagine that you've got 6 flashcards in front of you, the 6 C's, and I've put colors around this because I'm going to play one of them and I want you to tell me what color it is. So I think Beth is going to be my volunteer. So Beth, you can come off. And this is because, like, you might be really, really good at playing the 6 C's, but now I want to know that you can recognize these orally. So here they are. I'll just play them for you. Here's middle C. So here they all are. 5 sounds, 6 colors. Okay, so which color is this one?
Orange.
Oh, very quick, very good.
Green.
Yes.
Red or purple.
Red or purple, very good.
Yellow.
Oh, Beth's too good.
Ooh, orange and blue.
Oh, orange and blue. Actually, this would be orange and blue.
Oh no, you're right. It's yellow and blue. I'm not
Yellow
too
and blue. Yeah, that's really hard. Getting students to identify 2 at once is really hard. But it's amazing how many students they might be really good sight readers, but then identifying the sound is another skill that's actually really important as well. We need to know that we're sight reading the correct sound. Thank you, Beth, for being a fantastic volunteer. Now I want to show you a game that I made up based on this oral perspective. It's called Not a C. Now you will see my student Chloe. She has 6 C flashcards in front of her. I'm going to show you the video of this game that we play called Not a C. And the idea is that she has to identify the right C that I play. And if I play a note that's not a C, instead of putting the button on the card, she's got to throw the button in the bucket and say, not a C. So here she is. This is a 3-minute video of Chloe playing this game, and we're in the middle of the game at the moment. And she's just about to place a button on an incorrect C, you'll hear. And then when I do play something that's not a C, I ask her what the note is, and she can mostly do it. She has a bit of trouble with the lower notes. And also she's answering me in solfege because she's learning fixed do solfege. So C is do. That's that one. Oops, I played this one. Take that purple one away. Listen, you put it on this, but it sounds like this. Very good.
Nice.
Very good. Very good.
Nice.
Oh, very good. Now, if this is C, what's this one?
T.
Very good. It's a T. It's a T. That's amazing. Okay. You gotta throw it. Say it loud.
A C.
Not a C.
Not a C.
Okay, so what is this one? If this is a C. Yeah, but what is it?
Ray.
This would be Ray.
Me.
This would be B.
Fa.
This would be Fa.
So.
Yes, it's a so.
Not a C.
Very good. What is it?
Ray.
Yes, it's a ray. It's a
Because
D.
it sounds like it's like saying way.
It's exactly like saying Ray. That's right.
It sounds like saying me.
It is. So not a C.
Not a C.
Yeah, very good.
Isn't that a C?
It is. No, it is a C.
Oh.
That is so good. Chloe, give yourself a clap. Oh, she's just such a cutie. Now, we had played that game a couple of times before, and her oral really is very good. We sing every lesson. But it's such a fun game, and my teenagers love it. There's something so satisfying about throwing the button in the bucket and saying, not a C. And also you can play it with not a D, not a G. You can do it with any set of flashcards that's in front, and you're identifying the same pitch in different registers, and then trying to identify if that's not the pitch that I'm playing. So it's a fantastic way of developing relative pitch and pitch memory, because with the not a C, we've got the sound of the C in our heads and we're trying to work out the other notes. It's really, really good for that. Okay, for teaching patterns, another use of flashcards that I use is I like to use flashcards that have a stave but no clef. I much prefer this to the pre-reading that you often find, which is just notes and no stave. So the reason I like this is because I need to find out, first of all, are my young students reading from right to left? So for example, Beth, if you could come off mute again and just tell me, are these notes, are these going up or going down?
They are going up.
Okay. And are these notes going up or going down?
They are also going up.
Okay, so because Beth has answered those two correctly, I now know that Beth is reading from left to right. If students get this wrong, it's just because they're usually starting from the wrong end. What about these two notes?
They are going up.
Okay, very good. What about these notes? Going up or going down?
Staying the same.
Oh, very good. I couldn't trick you. There are some ones that are actually going down. Okay, here we go.
I think that's going down.
Yes, it's going down. Okay, so we've got the going down, going up. We know we're recognizing that. Then we have to, I teach my students how to recognize stepping versus skipping. So they understand skip a turn, even if they're very young, because they've played games like Uno, where skipping a turn means you miss something out. So they need to know that stepping means going line, space, and skipping means space, 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 or line, line, line. So now, Beth, are these stepping or skipping?
Those are stepping.
Yes, they are. And what about this?
They are also stepping.
Yes. And what about this?
Skipping.
Skipping. Okay. And now can you tell me whether it's stepping or skipping, and whether it's going up or going down?
Stepping down.
Oh, excellent.
Skipping up.
Great. Now Beth is being a model student here.
That music degree is really helping me. Skipping up.
Yes. So once you've got a student who is successfully identifying that on the cards, what I like to do then is just say, this is so perfect with piano. It's very much easier to teach sight reading on piano than any other instrument, because piano, we are so privileged because this visual pattern here relates directly to a visual and physical pattern on the piano. And there's no other instrument that works for, only keyboard instruments. So I just ask my students just to pick any note, play this pattern. And they know it's skipping up. So pick any note and they can just go just on the white notes. This is also great for adult students who are learning to read because they feel so liberated. I show them this and they go, oh, well, that's just skipping up. Just pick any note. Now, we see that and we want to read it, in a certain clef, but beginner sight readers don't need to do that. And then they can just pick any note on the piano. So I think this is a really valuable pre-reading activity. I think it's more valuable than only reading direction without a stave. I think that we really want to be recognizing patterns. And then this is how patterns are addressed in the book. So in the sight reading series. So we've got, I'm trying to basically emulate the flashcard experience. They've just got to pick a line and just play all the patterns on this line. So they've got to find their random note to start and then follow the pattern. This is not meant to be a melody. So by the time they get to the last bar, they've got to recognize that. They have to recognize that. But then they're just following the pattern. We never are trying to think of the names of notes before we play them because that's going to slow us down. We just want to recognize patterns. Then in book 2, we should be able to follow patterns, and we can follow it hands together. So let's all play this one. Can you play it on your imaginary keyboard in front of you? First, we're going to imagine we've clapped it first. The rhythm is often stripped out and made as a rhythm activity first, and then we get to play the thing in that exact rhythm. So that sounds like this. So very, very easy and easy to coordinate. And now we're reading rhythm and pitch and patterns all put together with easy exercises. It's very sequenced and very graded. That would be around about a 2nd to 3rd grade sight reading level. So Michelle and I researched all the types of sight reading examples that would go into an exam situation for most syllabuses. Then, by the time we get to the end of the series, we're looking at something like this, and rather than just being completely scared of all the black, we can see patterns. We can see that it just starts with a contrary motion scale. And we can see that it's stepping and skipping, and we're not scared. And then that's really helpful, because when we go on to sight read real repertoire, we want to be able to recognize patterns. Sight reading classical music is wonderful because it is so heavily based on stepping and skipping patterns, broken chords and scales. So when we're sight reading this Mozart, we know our rhythms and we've got our coordination going, and we can spot those patterns. And then in the second line in the bass, well, we've got intervals going along with our scales. So now let's talk about the sight reading of 2 notes at once, which is also unique to keyboard players. I mean, I know that string players have double stopping later on, but in terms of beginner sight reading, we really have to be able to read more than 1 note at once. So the way that intervals and chords are addressed in the series is that we start off, first of all, by identifying thirds and fourths, then thirds and fourths and fifths, and just recognizing a shape, recognizing a distance. And this is something we can just practice, because when we're experienced, we look at a piece of music and we recognize these things, but we need to be taught to recognize these things. Then for chords, the way they're addressed is very much based in a certain key. So in 3 major keys to start off with, we're just doing chords 1, 4, and 5, 7. And same in C major, same in G major. And then, as you can see from the bottom example, we're taught to recognize broken up chord patterns. Because when our students are young sight readers, we don't want them looking at a whole heap of notes like that and trying to name the notes. We want them to instantly see that it is a certain chord broken up. That is how we get efficient and fast sight reading. Then in book 2, we are learning how to read chord inversions, and we've also got little pieces to sight read that are kind of based on accompaniment patterns, chords with accidentals. And then by the time we get to book 3, we're really proficient at reading all sorts of chord shapes. Can you play this one now on your imaginary keyboard in front of you? Okay, so I was looking and I can see that your hand is not only going to the correct place on the keyboard, but your hand is taking a certain shape. You know what shape you need to play a 7th chord or to play a first inversion chord. You also know what fingering you need. And that is so important to teach our students and have fun little exercises that do that. So all of these are broken down in the books, rhythm and pitch and patterns and chords throughout the series. And then this becomes not hard to sight read when we have Toccatina, which is a grade 3 piece, so intermediate. Students can see, oh, they're just 2nd inversion chords. I know how to play that. And then when we're trying to sight read a piece like Bach Prelude No. 1, it's not just a bunch of scary semiquavers or 16th notes. It's a really fantastic sight reading piece. There's only 5 notes in that bar. It's just broken chords. And because there's only 5 notes in a bar, you can look at the next bar and you can get ready. This is a wonderful sight reading exercise because there are just different, it just changes only a little bit in each bar. So if we've been trained to recognize broken chords, then that is not going to be scary to look at. Okay, and then finally, pieces. We have to be able to sight read little pieces, and just like when we're first learning to read, when kids first learn to read English, well, they bring home little tiny readers, little repetitive books that they read, and then they go on to the next book. So we need that with pieces as well. So this is the very first sort of hands together experience in the beginner book, and as you can see, it's not really hands together at all, but we're still looking at a grand stave. We've got 2 notes together. So the beginner book is purely notation based, and by the end we're reading proficiently in C major. We're not actually worried about different keys in the beginner book. We are a bit C major centric. Then by the time we get into the next book, which is up to a grade 3 level, then we have 3 major keys and 3 minor keys. And this is roughly the standard of sight reading that would be expected at an intermediate level in an assessment. So let's all have a play of this one. But before we play, our students would be used to breaking it down. So first they would see the rhythm and they would understand how that rhythm is going to sound. Then they would see the patterns and they can see that in the right hand, it's mostly stepping. There are a couple of leaps. Leaps are no problem because we've done our random note reading exercise. We can see that it's in D minor. We know how to play D minor chords. That's not a problem. And then we can also incorporate the dynamics. So let's have a go at this one. Either play it on your lap or play it on your keyboard. Now, a word about chords in these examples. That's roughly a 3rd grade example, but in this book and also in the ABRSM sight reading examples, there are no chords in any of the assessments until grade 4 for AMEB and until grade 7 for ABRSM. But Michelle Matter and I decided, well, we have chords in real life. We are trying to teach real life sight reading, not just exam sight reading. So we're going to have chords in our examples. Chords are a very, very important part of pianists' lives. Okay, and then in the next book, so book 2, it's starting to get a bit more complicated with articulation and coordination. I'll just play the last 4 bars of this one. But we will have sight read the rhythm of that first, and by the time students get to this point, they're not scared off by the score. And then one of the final examples in book 3 is this. So it may look pretty scary, but I can promise you that if we've been through this course in a very sequenced way, once we get here, we're breaking down what we see. We are okay with reading chords in those positions. We can read in F major. We understand 12/8. We've tapped tons of rhythms in that time signature. So we end up with this cool little piece. Sounds like this. And students can do it. So what used to look scary on the page for someone who hasn't practiced sight reading becomes very, very doable. But if we don't actually practice sight reading, then that would be really difficult. It really is a separate skill that has to be practiced separately. So sometimes I have students who come to me and they are actually a pretty advanced piano player. Probably you've all had this situation where a student comes to you, a transfer student, and they can play wonderful pieces, but they can't sight read anything. Have you had that happen? And then you feel like you have to take them all the way back to the beginning. Well, in that situation, I would start any advanced pianist still on book 1, on the preliminary grade. I'd skip the beginner book and go straight to this. And then sometimes they're a little mortified at being put on book 1 of something, but you just need the right spin. And I say, well, look, you're probably going to fly through the first 5 levels, and then we'll see how you go, and then we can go into the next book. But what I wasn't able to show you in all of those examples online are the very motivational stickers that are part of this book. So every time they complete a section, they get a little key sticker, and there's somewhere to stick the sticker. That's very important, that there's somewhere to stick the sticker. And then once they've got all their 5 keys, rhythm, pitch, patterns, chords, pieces, then they do the test and they get a little key ring sticker once they've done the test. So the stickers are very motivational, particularly for teenagers. Teenagers love them. They never get given stickers anymore, so they really enjoy them. But it's also a sign of progress throughout the book because it looks like the page is not completed without the sticker there. And once they go through the whole series, which probably takes a good 5-6 years, they really are proficient sight readers. Plus games like Not a C and constant use of flashcards. And I really like the Piano Safari flashcards, and I'm just constantly putting them in front of my students and saying, what does this sound like? What does this sound like? So reading of different things all the time. Before I go on to talk about the other sight reading resource, I was just wondering if there are any questions about these books that I've been showing you. Beth, did any burning questions come up in the chat? Oh no.
All right, there was a quick question. I think this would be easy to answer. Do you do 6 C's where the student can see the piano, or are they hidden from the keyboard?
6 C's where the student can see the piano. Oh, I see. When they're trying to recognize it orally, I ask them not to look. Yeah, they're not allowed to look at the one that I'm playing. Yes.
All righty. And then we had a couple more. Where'd they go? What do you do for beginners that recognize notes on the flashcards going up or down, but can't remember which way is up or which way is down on the keyboard?
Oh, yes. That is something that absolutely has to be drilled. And it's something they just get used to. And I do a few things, like if I've got a really big magnet board, I just put a whole bunch of magnets right up the top and I say, play me this. And they go like this. And then I move all the magnets down the bottom of the magnet board and play me this. And they go, or put them in the middle and they play this. Just with bunches and then single notes, and they need to know which way is up and which way is down. Now play me some going up, going down, just games throughout a lesson. They will eventually remember through experience and through doing it.
Perfect. And then one last question. Do students just use the book in lessons, or do they also use it at home?
So they are sort of practicing at home. I'm asking them to try a line each day from each section each day, and they're doing that. And then in the lesson, I hear them play it, and then we see if we decide if they're good enough to get their key. And I can see that Marianne has asked, how do you stop them cheating by learning the exercises first? Well, I have found, I've been doing this for many years, over 15 years with these particular books, and cheating is not cheating. If they're going to go home and play them all through and can remember them and play them in the lesson and like look at it and they instantly recognize it and can play it, I can assure you that is still sight reading practice. It doesn't come out. They may think they're cheating, but they're still practicing their sight reading. They don't have time to learn every single exercise in the book and then manage to pull off the one that I point to. So if they're doing it, if they are really opening this book at home and doing it, that is not cheating. All the tests at the top, the pages at the top, every time there's a test in the book, it says, like for example, level 6 test, and then it says no picking. And they're mostly extremely honest, I would have to say. And even if the page accidentally comes up in the lesson, they're like this, oh, don't show me. It's really cute.
And then a last question, Donna just added, when students are working through a level in the books, do you have them work on one section at a time, example, rhythm notes, or multiple sections at a time?
Yes, it depends on the student. Most can handle multiple sections at a time because it's pretty quick to just do a couple of examples from each section. But if their rhythm is not great, then yes, we'll concentrate just on rhythm. So with there being 5 different sections for breaking down those elements, it might take a good 5-6 weeks to get through those elements, and then they might want to prepare for the test. So a good 10-week teaching term per level. There's 10 levels in the first book, so that's 10 terms, so that's more than 2 years. So that's around about right, I would say. You would certainly imagine that it would be more than 2 years to get from preliminary grade through to grade 3 of sight reading. So the books do last a very, very long time once you get onto them, and then of course siblings can use them as well. So they're actually very thick books and very good value. So, okay, well, if there aren't any more questions about the books at the moment, I would love to go on and show you the resource that I use from a completely opposite perspective, and that is the Rote Repertoire series. So with this book, sight reading book, this is pure notation. Yes, we are going to understand every single thing that's on the page. With this is not coming from a notation perspective. We are not going to understand every single thing that's on the page, and that is totally fine because we can still sight read. This is where we're taught things by rote. So this is not a piece of music you would put in front of a beginner because they can't understand 6 flats, they can't understand ledger lines, they can't understand ties, they haven't done these things yet. We haven't learned these things in notation. But that doesn't mean that we should never look at it. So first we would teach this piece by rote. And it's very easy once we've learned about 3 black notes and 2 black notes. So this piece goes like this. Then the opposite. Then coming down again. Then we go to the middle and left hand separate notes. If you're teaching that 2 bars at a time by rote and literally asking students to copy you, you set them up in the hand position, they can easily copy that. All detached, all the same finger. Down, down, down. It's very easy. So now I'm going to show you a video of me teaching this to 7-year-old Isabella. Now, I just want to tell you something. When I did this video, I couldn't actually get my real 7-year-old Isabella student to come and do the video because it was just at the beginning of the pandemic. So, because we were all locked down, I got my husband to stand in as 7-year-old Isabella, and he does a great job. And what I want you to watch out for in particular is when he does this very careful tuck of the hair. He's wearing a wig. Tuck of the hair behind his ear. It is really quite funny. So here is a video. It's a 3-minute video of me teaching beginner blacks. Take a seat, Isabella. All right. It's so lovely to have you here during this time of self-isolation. Now, you've been playing beginner blacks at home all week, haven't you, Isabella? Yes, excellent. And now look, here is the music. This is what you've been playing. And so you can play your piece again now, and this time you might like to look at the music. So remember, you start up here and down here. just need to, I forgot to mention that the premise of this is that if you have taught beginner blacks to your student, then they go home, they play it completely by rote, and then the next week in the lesson, then you show them the music. So this is the stage that Isabella is at now. She has already been playing it at home for a week. Now, also, I just need to tell you, my husband is not really a piano player. He plays a little bit of trombone. He's actually a software engineer. Okay. Oh, that's beautiful, especially since you've been practicing that so beautifully all week at home. Okay, here is level 2. Do you notice a difference?
There's 2 G's.
There's 2 notes there, that's right. There's 2 instead of 1. How do you think that will sound? Exactly. Okay, so let's pretend I've already gone through all the differences with Isabella. We're going to fast forward this a little bit. Okay, Isabella, now you can play all of level 2. At the end. Absolutely stunning. That was beautiful, Isabella. Now, imagine that another week has gone by. Perhaps Isabella would like to practice that at home for a week. That's fine. Or we might be able to go straight onto level 3 in the same lesson. We can go on in the same lesson, Isabella. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Okay. What differences do you see now?
There's 2 together with a line underneath.
That's right. How would you clap this rhythm in the first bar? You know that because you've been doing your sight reading for beginners. Can you clap that? Oh my gosh, that's so good. So how will that sound when you play it?
That's
so fantastic. That is so fantastic. Why don't you play all of level 3 now? Normally we'd high five, but no touching, you know. Okay, well, that is brilliant. Thank you, Isabella. You may go. Okay, so that was husband Andrew. Very, very lovely of him to step in and be Isabella. So that is how you can use the series to improve sight reading, because we're engaging with the score for level 2 and then level 3. And this works really well for students who are advanced with their playing, and it's a bit demoralizing for them to go back to the beginning with sight reading. So what we can do is we can teach them pieces that sound decent, teach them by rote, and then get them to spot differences in the score and be able to correlate that difference to sound. So here is, I'll show you one more piece. This is Groove It, level 1, and it is inspired by Queen's We Will Rock You, which is the so it's all on black notes. It's very easy, but it's got a bit of a groovy sound. So for an advanced piano player, let's say you've got a transfer student who really doesn't read music very well, you can either teach this completely by rote or kind of semi-rote. You can maybe show them the score, but just say, look, you're only going to use 2 black notes in each hand, and then you're going to move down to 1 extra black note at the end. So this is how Groove It sounds. Third line, almost the same. With a little wiggle. And then 4th line starts the same. Go to the next black note and get ready, and we teach that by rote, that last bit. So now we're able to play it really easily, and once we can play it really easily, then we can see how that works on the score. Now I'm about to change it to level 2. So see if you can spot the difference with what happens in level 2. Ready, set, go. Okay, so did you see what happened there? Now, instead of the claps, we've got the 2-note chords, just like we had in level 1. So we've got, and then we've got the wiggle straight away. We had that in level 1 in the 3rd line. So students can spot the differences and they can see how that will probably sound. And then they're engaging with the score. They're actually sight reading that level 2. Now I'm going to change it to level 3. So see if you can spot the difference. Ready, set, go. Okay, did you see what happened there? So very subtle difference. There's now an extra note on the 4th beat of the last bar of each line. So we have, and just that extra note makes it sound a bit more groovy. And students are able to work out what that note is because they can just see the direction. They understand stepping and skipping and patterns, and so they're just relating it to a rather cool sound. Now, there's also a duet part for Groove It. It comes in a digital pack, and the duet part is quite fun because it involves some overlapping of arms between the 2 players. So now I'm going to show you a video of me and my student playing the Groove It duet, but he wanted to change it a bit. And I always encourage my students actually to go on and do a level 4, which is their own version of the piece. If you want to know more about composing and improvising using the Rote Repertoire series, we're going to send you a link to previous webinars that I've done on this topic. But here's me and Jed playing his level 4 duet of Groove It, and you'll hear it kind of devolves a little bit at the end. So that was my student Jed, who absolutely hated sight reading until I started him on the Rote Repertoire series. And I kind of wrote it for students who hated sight reading, who needed something more. So it really was originally conceived as a way of being able to have something satisfying to play, and the more satisfying a piece is, the harder it is to look at notation-wise, but it might be really, really easy to play. So it's okay if we don't understand everything on the page, because this is the beginning of all sight reading skills. So I originally conceived that series to improve sight reading, and all of the pieces are written for beginners and above. So students in their first 2 years of learning. And I can see that someone's just asked, could you use it in a group class at the same time? I have taught this in groups and it works really well. It's really fun if the students can all see the music, if they're all comparing level 1 and level 2, and get them to spot the difference as a group. And yes, you could overlay the levels, but the idea is that you play level 1, you see the differences in the score, then you go to level 2, level 3, etc., duet, and then make up your own and make up a level 4. So that is how you can have a repertoire resource that helps with sight reading, and it also really, really helps students who are particularly scared of score reading. Perhaps I know that my friend Becky Laurent, who is a specialist in dyslexic students, she has had great success with this series. People who just find it anxiety inducing find it so much more easy when they've already played something and then they can see it on a score and then they're just spotting differences. So that's how that works. Now we are about to go on to the live bonuses, your gifts. But just before we do that, are there any really burning questions that I should answer before we do that? Because I am also very conscious of your time.
I think you've addressed the only one we saw from Lee about the different levels and groups.
Great. Okay, fantastic. Well, if you have any more questions, even if you think of them after this webinar, feel free to email me. I'm always on email and I will answer your questions. And also we will send you links, really useful links in the follow-up email, which you will get in the next couple of days. Okay, so let's talk about our bonuses, because I want to thank you so much for being here. And it's been very lovely of you. So live bonus number 1 is Beth is going to put a link in the chat right now for you to get a PDF of level 1 of the beginner book, completely free. So you can try that out if you have never tried it before. And that is really great to do with all of your young students and with anybody who finds sight reading difficult. And I would preface it with probably doing this sort of thing. Just recognizing steps and skips, and I preface it making sure we understand basic rhythm values like quarter notes and whole notes and quarter rests, so crotchet rests and semi-breves and crotchets, and just generally understanding the function of a stave. So there's that link there for you right now. And then the next live bonus has to do with the Black Note bundle. So this is a new release on the Rote Repertoire site, and the Black Note bundle contains 7 pieces all on black notes. So we have Beginner Blacks and Groove It, which you've heard today, that's in this bundle, and Reverse Blacks, Black Kite, Mini Move, Flying, Feeling Good. These are all fun notes that are all on black notes. And this bundle, the value is $65. That's US dollars, because there's 7 pieces in there. And each piece comes with video tutorials and a teacher guide and audio tracks and the duet parts for some of them and backing tracks for some of them. And it's all studio licensed sheet music. So you can give it to every single one of your students forever. You can print out 1 billion copies if you wish. Now, the regular bundle price is $39, so it's already nearly half, even just a regular price. But Beth is going to put a link in the chat. You can get it today for half of that, so $19.50, and that's for those 7 pieces, including Beginner Blacks and Groove It. So the link to that special is going in the chat now. And that is only for today. So you have to be on the chat to get that. So download, as long as you download that link, you have a day or 2 to get through, but then it will expire. Okay, and then live bonus number 3 is if you use the code EXPERT in a checkout on the Blitzbook site, you can get $15 off any one of these products. Anything in the sight reading category. There's also another book called How to Blitz Sight Singing, which is also in the sight reading category. We haven't talked that much about that this morning, but it's quite a good book. So $15 off any of those products. Unfortunately, that is only if you're in Australia, because on blitzbooks.com we can only ship to Australian addresses, and that's only on the Blitzbook site. You won't be able to get that discount off any other print music sites. So just to let you know that if you're in Australia and you want hard copy, it's from blitzbooks.com and use the code EXPERT. And if you're outside Australia and you want hard copies, Sheet Music Plus. And if you're in Australia or outside Australia, no matter where you are and you want Rote Repertoire, there's roterepertoire.com for there's over 100 pieces on that site, and you'll find something for everybody, for every one of your students. So while you are going to the chat and making sure that you've downloaded all your links, we want to make sure that you have time to do that. I will just sum up by saying that teaching sight reading is my absolute passion, but I have changed so much over the past 20 years. I've changed the way I use flashcards. I've changed my opinion of rote teaching. I used to think that rote was bad, but now I think that rote is a wonderful, wonderful tool because it can help us establish a hand position and then take all the stress out of score reading. And I think if you use resources at your fingertips and you have the right resources, you can sight reading is such a teachable skill, and we need to educate parents that just because the music is in front of students when they're practicing their Chopin Nocturne or their Mozart Sonata, that's a hard piece that they're practicing and practicing. That's not a reading skill. Just because the music is there, that's not reading, that's still rehearsing. All the initial decoding happened a long time ago. And so sight reading is this separate skill that has to be practiced separately, and you just need the right resources to help you along. But then anybody can become a really, really proficient sight reader. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today. And we will send you links about where to get things, where to get in terms of the flashcards. I can see somebody asking, I think these are Alfred flashcards from the basic piano method, but most basic flashcard sets that you get, you can find these, but also it's really easy to just make some. You could just print out some pieces of paper and have 5 lines written on it and just draw some circles in. It's really easy to make simple flashcards for your students. So I have just had the best time here with you this morning, and thank you again. And if you are watching the replay, look out for your little bonuses that are coming, also little replay bonus coming via email in a couple of days. And I hope that this has been helpful for you, and thank you so much, and goodbye.